Kitana. You're my daughter now.
I got you something.
Outworld has issued their challenge, and the other gods.
Mortal Kombat, huh? What's that, some kind of fan film? I think it's time for you guys to fuck off. But hey,
Come with us, Mr. Cage, and discover the man you were.
robot arms. That dude's got incredibly handsome.
It gets
Get to save the world.
You, Johnny Cage, are part of
fights.
Pretender.
One sling around it. They want Keanu Reeves murdering 1,000. You're normally a little more animated.
Your incessant whinging, we can build you another.
And you, where are you going with that?
Shao Kahn showed me the pleasures of a life eternal.
Blood hits the stone before anyone says a word. In Edenia, the sky is not blue anymore. It burns red, like the heavens themselves have been wounded. King Jared stands in front of his people with a broken sword in his hand, but there is no army left behind him. Only ash, only screams. And walking through that smoke is Shao Kahn, huge, silent, carrying the kind of power that makes even brave men forget how to breathe. Jared swings once. Shao Kahn catches the blade. Crack! The king falls, and with him, a whole realm loses its future. Princess Kitana watches from the shadows, too young to understand politics, old enough to understand death. Her mother, Sindel, does not scream. That is somehow worse. Her face becomes stone, but her eyes are begging the universe to wake up from this nightmare. It doesn't. Shao Kahn steps over the king's body and looks at Edenia like it was always meant to belong to him. And in that moment, Kitana learns the first rule of Outworld. Love makes you weak, and weakness gets buried. Years later, Earthrealm does not know it is already standing at the edge of extinction. People go to work. Lights flicker in apartments. Cars sit in traffic. Nobody looks up and wonders if another world is sharpening its teeth, except Raiden. The Thunder God stands inside a ruined temple where the air smells of rain and old stone. Sonya Blade is beside him, jaw tight, eyes tired from too many battles nobody will ever believe. Liu Kang waits in silence. Jax flexes his metal arms, the faint hum of them cutting through the dark. Cole Young stares at the dragon mark on his skin, wishing Destiny had chosen someone else. But Destiny is cruel. They need one more champion. And that champion is currently drunk, famous, washed up, and arguing with his own movie poster. Johnny Cage stands in a cheap Hollywood bar, staring at a giant cardboard cutout of himself from 10 years ago. That Johnny is smiling. That Johnny has perfect hair, perfect teeth, and a fake explosion behind him. The real Johnny has sunglasses indoors, bruised pride, and a drink he keeps pretending he doesn't need. The bartender tells him his latest movie bombed. Johnny laughs like it doesn't hurt, but his fingers tighten around the glass. For years, people called him a fighter, a star, a legend. Now they call him a joke with abs. His agent won't answer. His fans want nostalgia, not him. And when he looks into the mirror behind the bar, he sees something worse than failure. He sees fear. Then the lights go out. Silence. Every bottle behind the counter begins to tremble. The air turns cold enough to raise goosebumps on Johnny's arms. He turns slowly, expecting paparazzi, maybe some prank show trying to humiliate him for clicks. Instead, Sonya Blade steps from the darkness. Behind her, Raiden's eyes glow like a storm trapped inside a man. Johnny blinks. "Nope," he says. "Whatever this is, I'm not signing anything." Sonya doesn't smile. She tosses a folder onto the bar. Inside are photographs, monsters with blades for teeth, bodies frozen in unnatural positions, symbols burned into skin. Johnny flips through them, waiting for the punchline. There isn't one. Raiden speaks softly, but the room seems to shake around his voice. Earthrealm is in danger. A tournament is coming, If they lose, Shao Kahn will not invade like a king. He will erase them like a stain. Johnny laughs again, but this time it sounds thin. You want me to fight monsters from another dimension? Sonya leans closer. You already have the mark. Johnny looks down. On his chest, beneath the open collar of his shirt, the dragon symbol glows faintly against his skin. He stumbles back. That mark was supposed to be nothing. A weird scar from an accident he barely remembered. A private embarrassment. Something he covered with makeup during shirtless scenes. But now it burns, hot and alive, like something inside him has finally heard its name being called. And far away in a throne room carved from bone and black stone, Shao Kahn hears it too. He sits beneath banners stolen from dead realms. Beside him stands Kitana, beautiful, deadly, unreadable. She has learned to keep her face still because Outworld punishes emotion. But when Shao Kahn speaks of Earthrealm's final champions, her hand tightens around her fan blade. Just once. Almost nothing. But Jade sees it. And somewhere below the palace, in a chamber where dead things are not allowed to stay dead, Quan Chi smiles over a body wrapped in shadow. A warrior's hand twitches. Then another. Someone who should never rise again opens his eyes. Back in Earthrealm, Johnny Cage says the only sensible thing left. I'm going home. But the floor beneath him cracks with golden light. Raiden reaches for him. Sonya shouts his name. Too late. Johnny falls through thunder, smoke, and impossible cold, and lands on his knees in a world that smells like blood, iron, and war. A blade touches his throat. Kitana looks down at him, eyes colder than moonlight. And from somewhere above them, a monstrous voice roars. Let Mortal Kombat begin! The blade at Johnny Cage's throat is so sharp he feels his own pulse bumping against it. For one perfect second, the movie star part of his brain tries to treat this like a set. Smoke machines, extras in armor, some ridiculous fantasy reboot with too much budget and not enough script. Then he smells it. Not fake blood, not stage dirt, real iron, real rot. Real fear soaked into the stones beneath his hands. His mouth goes dry. Kitana does not blink. Johnny lifts both hands slowly. Okay, great costume. Very intense. Huge fan of whatever this is. The blade presses harder. A tiny bead of blood slides down his neck. Behind Kitana, Outworld stretches like a nightmare that learned architecture. Towers lean over a burning arena. Chains hang from statues with screaming faces. Above everything, Shao Kahn's voice rolls through the air, deep enough to shake dust from the walls. Thousands roar back his name. Johnny's jokes die in his throat. Then thunder splits the sky. Raiden lands between them in a flash of white light, and the Force throws Kitana back 3 steps. Sonya appears next, already reaching for her weapon. Jax hits the ground beside Johnny with a metallic crash, and Liu Kang rises from the smoke with fire curling between his fingers. Johnny stares at them. You people do this often? No, Cole says, pulling him up. His eyes never leave the arena gates. This is worse. Across the stone floor, Kitana recovers with impossible grace. She could attack. She should attack. But her gaze flicks once toward Raiden, then toward the high throne where Shao Kahn watches from above. Something passes across her face so quickly Johnny almost misses it. Not hatred. Warning. Shao Kahn raises one hand and the crowd becomes silent at once. That kind of silence is not respect. It is terror with its mouth covered. He welcomes Earthrealm's champions like a butcher welcoming lambs. His armor gleams black and gold, and the skull-shaped helmet hides everything human except the hunger in his voice. He says the rules are ancient. One realm against another. Victory means survival. Defeat means submission. But Raiden's jaw tightens because something is wrong. The tournament has begun too early. Earthrealm was supposed to have time. Shao Kahn smiles as if he can hear that thought. Then the first gate opens. A creature steps out carrying 2 hooked blades, its skin scarred, its teeth filed sharp. The crowd chants a name Johnny does not understand, but Jax clearly does. His metal fists close with a low mechanical growl. I'll take this one. Sonya grabs his arm, Jax, but he is already moving. The fight starts fast. Too fast. Hooked steel swings for Jax's face. He blocks, sparks jumping from his arms. The creature laughs and slashes again, carving deep grooves into the metal. Jax drives a punch into its ribs, and the sound is ugly, wet, satisfying. The crowd roars. Johnny watches with his stomach twisting. This is not choreography. No stunt pads. No second takes. The creature hooks one blade behind Jax's knee and rips him down. Stone cracks under his weight. Sonya takes a step forward, but Liu Kang catches her wrist. If she interferes, the match is broken. If the match is broken, Earthrealm pays. Jax rolls away just before the second blade splits the ground where his head was. He rises slower this time. One of his arms jerks, damaged, the fingers twitching like they cannot remember how to close. The creature sees it. So does Shao Kahn. Jax breathes hard. His shoulders slump for half a second. Half a second is enough. The creature lunges, and Jax stops running. He plants his feet, lets the hook come, then catches the chain wrapped around the blade with his broken metal hand. It slices into the machinery, but he holds. His face tightens. Pain flashes across it. Then he yanks. The creature flies forward. Jax's other fist crashes into its skull. Silence. The body drops. Earthrealm's first victory lands like thunder, but nobody celebrates. Because high above, Shao Kahn does not look angry. He looks amused, like he wanted to see how much hope they still had left. Then he turns his helmet toward Katana. She lowers her eyes immediately. Johnny sees it again. The tiny betrayal of fear. A princess trained to kill, trapped beside the monster who murdered her world. Before he can think about that, another gate opens. This time, the arena goes quiet for a different reason. Cold spills across the stone. Frost crawls along the walls. Raiden's expression changes, and Cole's breath catches like someone just reached into his chest. A warrior steps into the light wearing armor black as a grave, ice forming around his hands. His face is hidden, but his presence tears something open in the air. Cole whispers one name. Behan. Johnny looks at him. You know this guy? Cole does not answer. The dead warrior lifts his head, and beneath the mask, his eyes glow with a darkness that does not belong to any living soul. Then Quan Chi appears in the shadows behind him, smiling. Raiden's voice drops. That is not Behan anymore. The warrior raises one frozen hand toward Cole, and the arena hears its next command. Noob Saibot, fight. Cole's body forgets how to move. The arena is roaring, but he hears none of it. All he hears is the crackle of ice, the low scrape of Noob Saibot's boots across stone, and the memory of another man wrapped in fire and vengeance. Scorpion, Hanzo Hasashi, his bloodline, his curse, the ancestor who dragged Cole out of an ordinary life and into a war older than nations. Now the enemy who destroyed that bloodline stands in front of him again. But wrong. Behan once felt like winter-given flesh. Cruel, focused, alive with hatred. This version is emptier. The cold around him does not bite like ice. It swallows like a grave. Shadows cling to his armor, dripping from him like black smoke, and when he tilts his head, it is not curiosity. It is hunger. Cole steps into the arena. Sonya says his name, sharp and scared. He does not turn back. Noob Saibot attacks without warning. 1 second he stands across the arena, the next he is in front of Cole, fist wrapped in darkness. Cole barely raises his arms before the blow sends him skidding across stone. His armor flashes gold across his skin, but the impact still rattles his bones. Johnny flinches. Okay, that is cheating. Liu Kang watches closely, fire pulsing in his palms. No, that is sorcery. Quan Chi's smile widens from the shadows. Cole rises, blood fills his mouth, he spits red onto the ground and forces himself forward. He has never wanted this. Not the mark, not the tournament. Not the weight of being someone's descendant, someone's weapon, someone's unfinished revenge. He wanted his family safe. That was all. A simple thing. Outworld has a way of making simple things impossible. Noob's shadow tears away from his body. Cole freezes. The shadow moves on its own. It slips behind him, silent, and punches him in the spine. Cole drops to one knee. The real Noob Saibot strikes from the front, a knee to the face, then a blade of darkness across Cole's shoulder. The arena cheers for every wound, and high above, Shao Kahn leans forward. He is not watching the fight. He is watching Cole break. Inside Cole's mind, panic claws upward. I can't beat this. The thought lands like a stone in his chest. He sees his wife's face, his daughter's hands holding his. He sees their fear when monsters first came for them, sees the way they looked at him like he could protect them. What if they were wrong? Noob Saibot grabs Cole by the throat and lifts him. Cold spreads down Cole's neck into his lungs, into the space where courage should be. The shadow clone rises beside them, mirroring the grip. 2 hands, 2 deaths. Then the darkness whispers. Not in Outworld's language, in Cole's own voice. You are not Hanzo. Something inside him cracks, not from pain, but from shame. Below the throne, Katana's face remains still, but her fingers tighten again. She has watched champions die before. Strong ones, brave ones, men who believe destiny made them untouchable. Destiny is just a word people use before the blade falls. But this man fights for family. That makes him dangerous and vulnerable. Noob throws Cole into the wall. Stone breaks behind him. He collapses, coughing, his golden armor flickering like a dying candle. Raiden steps forward, thunder gathering in his hands, but the tournament law holds him back like invisible chains. Shao Kahn speaks with quiet pleasure. Your champion is finished? Cole hears it. Finished. The word brings something back. A cage fight years ago, after another loss. Men laughing. His body bruised, his pride on the floor. He had believed them then too. Believed he was done. Believed he was nothing more than a man who almost mattered. Then his daughter had run to him anyway. Not because he won. Because he came home. Cole pushes one hand against the stone. His fingers shake. His breath tears in and out. Noob Saibot approaches, slow now, enjoying the ending. Cole whispers, "I'm not Hanzo." His armor flares. He lifts his head. "I'm the one still here." Gold erupts across his body. Not smooth, not clean, but raw and burning, shaped by pain instead of legend. Noob strikes. Cole catches the blow. The shadow clone lunges from behind. Cole twists, dragging Noob's real body into its path. Darkness hits darkness, and the arena gasps. For the first time, Noob Saibot stumbles. Cole attacks. Fast, desperate, human. Every punch carries fear, love, rage, and everything he refuses to lose. He drives Noob backward, one step, then another. For a heartbeat, Earthrealm believes. Then Quan Chi raises 2 fingers, barely a gesture. Noob's shadow opens beneath Cole's feet like a black mouth. Cole falls through it. He drops from the sky a second later and smashes into the center of the arena, armor shattered, body limp. Sonya screams, Raiden's eyes blaze. But Cole is still breathing. Noob Saibot raises a blade of darkness for the final strike. And that is when a chain spear rips out of the flames behind him. Get over here. The chain spear wraps around Noob Saibot's chest and yanks him backward like judgment itself has grabbed him. Flames explode across the arena wall. Out of them steps Scorpion, no longer a ghost story whispered through Cole's blood, but a burning wound in human shape. His armor is charred. His eyes glow with hellfire. Every breath leaves smoke behind his mask. And for the first time since the tournament began, Outworld's crowd goes quiet. Even Shao Kahn stops smiling. Cole lies broken on the stone, barely able to lift his head. Through blurred vision, he sees Hanzo Hasashi stand between him and death. Not like a savior. Like a father who arrived too late once and refuses to arrive too late again. Noob Saibot rises slowly. For a moment, the 2 warriors stare at each other across the arena. Once, they were murder and revenge. Now they are something worse. One soul chained to hellfire. One soul hollowed out by darkness. 2 dead men still being used by living monsters. Scorpion's voice is rough, almost human. Bihan. Noob Saibot tilts his head. Nothing. No recognition, no regret, no hate sharp enough to be personal. Only Quan Chi's shadow moving behind his eyes. And that is the cruelty of it. Scorpion came ready to face the man who slaughtered his clan, but that man is gone. What remains is a weapon wearing his enemy's body. Quan Chi steps from the darkness, applauding softly. Touching, he says. The ancestor protects the child. Scorpion turns his head just enough to see him. The fire around his hands grows wild. Raiden feels the trap before anyone else does. His eyes flash toward the throne, toward the arena markings, toward the ancient symbols glowing beneath the blood on the floor. This match was never only about Cole. It was bait. Shao Kahn needed Scorpion pulled out of the Netherrealm into a tournament circle bound by old magic, a place where even vengeance has rules, a place where a soul can be claimed if it breaks the law. Sonya sees Raiden's face change. What is it? Raiden's voice is tight. If Hanzo kills outside the chosen match, his soul belongs to Outworld. Johnny, bruised and terrified, looks from Scorpion to Noob to Quan Chi. That feels like information we should have had earlier. In the arena, Cole understands none of the magic. He only understands the blade still in Noob's hand, the blood in his mouth, the fact that Scorpion is standing where death should be. No, Cole coughs. Don't. Scorpion does not look back. Noob attacks. Flame and shadow collide so hard the arena floor splits. Scorpion's spear whips through smoke, Noob's darkness bends around it, and every strike sounds like chains snapping in the pit of the world. They move too fast for Johnny to follow. Fire cuts black air. Shadow swallows fire. Scorpion drives a burning fist into Noob's mask, but Noob separates from his own shadow, letting the blow pass through empty darkness. Then the shadow appears behind Cole. Katana moves before she thinks. Her fan blade flashes open and slices the shadow across the back, breaking its shape just before it reaches Cole's throat. The whole arena sees it. One clean act of defiance. Silence. Katana freezes. Shao Kahn slowly turns toward her. There are moments when a life changes without thunder, without music, without warning, just one decision. One blade moved in the wrong direction. One truth exposed too early. Katana lowers her fan, but it is done. Jade's eyes widen from the side of the throne. Melina smiles like she has been waiting years for this. Shao Kahn's voice drops to something almost gentle. Daughter. That word hits Katana harder than any weapon. Daughter. The lie he carved into her life. The cage he made sound like love. Johnny sees her face crack for the first time. Scorpion and Noob keep fighting, but the real danger has shifted. Shao Kahn descends from the throne, each step shaking dust from the pillars. He is not rushing. He does not need to. Every person in that arena knows what happens when the Emperor feels embarrassed. Katana stands alone in the open, her fan blade trembling just enough to betray her. Cole tries to rise. Fails. Sonya reaches for her weapon. Raiden's thunder curls around his fists, fighting the ancient law. Shao Kahn stops in front of Katana and lifts her chin with one armored finger. You still mourn Edenia? Katana says nothing. He leans closer, then mourn it properly. A gate opens behind him. Sindel steps out. Not the grieving queen from Katana's memory. Not the mother whose silence once broke her heart. This Sindel wears black armor, her hair flowing like a living storm, her eyes empty and bright with dark magic. Katana's breath catches. For the first time, she looks young. Shao Kahn's helmet turns toward the arena. Kill the Earthrealm champion, he commands. Sindel smiles at Cole, and Katana whispers, Mother? Sindel's smile is beautiful in the way a blade is beautiful right before it enters the skin. Katana cannot move. Every lesson, every battle, every scar inside her tells her to step back, raise her fan, survive. But the woman walking toward Cole has her mother's face, her mother's mouth, her mother's hands, hands that once braided Katana's hair before Edenia burned, hands that once covered her ears when the palace shook from war drums. Now those hands glow with stolen magic. Cole drags himself backward, leaving a dark smear of blood across the stone. His armor flickers weakly, trying to protect him, trying to answer a body that has nothing left to give. Sindel glides closer, and the arena seems to lean with her. Even Outworld's monsters hold their breath. Then she screams, not like pain, like power. The sound hits Cole first. His body lifts from the ground as if invisible claws have seized him. Stone shatters around him. Johnny drops to his knees, hands clamped over his ears. Sonya staggers. Jax's metal arms spark. Liu Kang's flames blow sideways in the force of it. Katana remains standing, barely. Tears fill her eyes, but she refuses to let them fall. Because if she cries, Shao Kahn wins twice. Mother, she whispers again, louder now. Look at me. Sindel's head turns. For half a heartbeat, something trembles beneath the black magic. A small break in the darkness, a memory trying to breathe. Shao Kahn sees it. His fist closes. The spell around Sindel tightens like a chain, and her eyes burn brighter. She turns away from Katana and raises one hand toward Cole's chest. Katana understands. If Sindel kills Cole, Earthrealm loses another champion. If Katana stops her, she becomes a traitor in front of all Outworld. No shadows left. No pretending. No careful survival. Just truth. And truth is expensive. She opens both fan blades. Jade appears beside her before anyone can react, staff spinning into her hands. Katana looks at her, shocked, but Jade only says, I saw your hand shake. Melina laughs from the throne steps, licking one sharpened tooth. How touching. Sisters and servants playing heroes. Katana's face hardens. We were never sisters, that lands. Melina's smile breaks into something uglier, something wounded, something hungry. She launches herself across the arena with a snarl, twin says flashing for Katana's throat. Jade intercepts her. Steel rings against steel. Melina moves like an animal wearing royal skin, fast and vicious. Every strike meant to tear instead of defeat. Jade is cleaner, calmer, but Melina fights with years of poison in her blood. Jealousy. Rejection. The knowledge that even when Shao Kahn called her daughter, the room still looked at Katana first. Meanwhile, Sindel's scream rises again. Cole's body arches in the air. Bones threaten to snap. Sonya breaks free of the sound and fires. The bullets curve away before touching Sindel. Jax charges, but another wave of force throws him backward into the arena wall. Johnny sees Cole dying. Something shifts in him. Not courage. Not yet. Courage sounds too clean. This is panic with nowhere else to go. He sees all the fights he faked, all the heroic poses he sold on posters, all the speeches where he pretended to be the man everyone wanted. And now a real man is dying 10 steps away. Johnny stands. His knees are shaking. His ears are bleeding. He has no plan, no training for screaming witch queens, no idea what the glowing mark on his chest even wants from him, but he runs anyway. Sonya shouts, "Johnny, don't! Too late!" He throws himself between Sindel and Cole. Sindel's power hits him full in the chest. For one terrible second, Johnny thinks his heart has exploded. White pain floods everything. His sunglasses fly off. His body bends backward, feet sliding across broken stone. Then green light bursts from his skin. The arena falls silent. Johnny looks down at his own hands as energy crackles around them, bright and wild, like his fear has turned into fire. He laughs once, breathless and stunned. "Oh," he whispers, "that's new." Sindel attacks again. Johnny raises both arms, and the green energy forms a shield just before the scream hits. It holds. Not perfectly. Not easily. His boots carve trenches in the stone. His face twists with effort, but he holds. Cole drops to the ground behind him, gasping. Raiden's eyes widen. Liu Kang smiles for the first time. Shao Kahn does not. The Emperor steps forward, fury finally breaking through his amusement. The tournament was supposed to crush hope piece by piece. Jax was supposed to limp. Cole was supposed to die. Katana was supposed to obey. Johnny Cage was supposed to be a joke. Instead, Earthrealm has found another weapon. Shao Kahn raises his warhammer. The arena darkens beneath its shadow. Raiden moves, but the old magic still burns around him. Katana turns toward Sindel, voice shaking but clear. "I will not lose you again." Sindel's eyes flicker. Melina screams. Noob Saibot tears free from Scorpion's chain, and Shao Kahn brings the hammer down toward Johnny Cage's skull. The hammer falls like the sky itself has decided to kill Johnny Cage. He cannot dodge. His body is locked in place, green energy still trembling around his arms, Cole coughing blood behind him, Sindel's scream pressing against his bones. For one ridiculous, crystal-clear second, Johnny thinks about his old stunt coordinator yelling, "Never look at the prop, look at the mark." But this is not a prop. This is Shao Kahn. The hammer comes down. Thunder explodes between them. Raiden catches the weapon with both hands, lightning bursting from his shoulders, the ancient law burning lines of fire across his skin. He is not allowed to interfere. Every god in every realm seems to scream that truth at once. But Raiden holds the hammer anyway, teeth clenched, eyes blazing white. "Move," he growls. Johnny moves. Shao Kahn pushes harder, and Raiden drops to one knee. The ground breaks beneath him. The lightning around his body starts turning red, corrupted by the tournament magic punishing him for protecting his champions. Sonya grabs Johnny and drags him back. "You picked a great time to glow." "I didn't pick anything," Johnny gasps. His hands are still lit green, still shaking. "My body just made a decision without the committee." Across the arena, Scorpion and Noob Saibot crash through a wall of fire and shadow. Scorpion drives his blade into Noob's shoulder, but Noob's body splits into smoke and reforms behind him. Quan Chi watches every movement like a patient man counting coins. He is not waiting for Noob to win. He is waiting for Scorpion to break the rules. Cole sees it now. Through pain, through blood, through the ringing in his ears, he understands the shape of the trap. Scorpion wants Quan Chi. Quan Chi wants Scorpion's soul. Shao Kahn wants Earthrealm distracted long enough to slaughter them one by one. Cole crawls toward Hanzo. Every inch feels impossible. "No," he whispers. "Don't chase him." Scorpion does not hear. Or maybe he does, and vengeance is louder. Quan Chi steps backward into shadow, smiling. Scorpion follows. Then Katana moves. She throws her fan blade, not at an enemy, but at the arena floor. It spins through the ancient symbols, cutting across one glowing mark. The magic stutters. Raiden feels the pressure weaken for half a breath. Half a breath is enough. He twists Shao Kahn's hammer aside. Johnny fires a burst of green energy without knowing how, and it slams into Shao Kahn's chest. The Emperor slides back one step. One step. The crowd gasps like the realm itself has been slapped. Johnny looks at his hands. "I meant to do that." "No, you didn't." Sonya says. Absolutely did not. But that step changes everything. Liu Kang attacks next, fire roaring around his fists. Jax charges beside him, broken arm sparking, the other fist cocked back with every ounce of rage he has left. For the first time, Earthrealm does not look like survivors. They look like a team. Shao Kahn laughs. Then he swings. The hammer hits Jax first, sending him across the arena in a spray of sparks. Liu Kang catches the next blow with fire, but the force drives him backward. Sonya fires until her weapon clicks empty. Johnny throws green energy in panicked bursts, missing twice, hitting once. Cole forces himself up and steps beside him, armor flickering gold. They are not enough. Not yet. Katana reaches Sindel while the battlefield tears itself apart. Her mother stands frozen, caught between spell and memory, between Shao Kahn's command and a daughter's voice. Katana lowers her weapons. Bad idea, terrible idea. But some cages do not open to blades. Edenia had a garden behind the east tower, Katana says, voice shaking. You told me the white flowers only opened after rain. Sindel's lips tremble. Katana steps closer. You sang when you thought no one could hear you. Shao Kahn notices. His voice cracks across the arena. Sindel. The spell surges. Sindel's face twists, and she grabs Katana by the throat. Jade screams her name. Melina, bleeding from one shoulder, watches with bright, hungry joy. Katana does not fight back. Her feet lift from the ground. Her breath chokes. Still, she reaches up and touches her mother's face. Please, she whispers. Nothing. Then Sindel's eyes fill with tears. She drops Katana as if burned. Silence. For one heartbeat, mother and daughter stare at each other, both ruined by the same man. Shao Kahn's rage turns the air cold. Then die with her. He raises the hammer again, but before he can strike, the arena floor splits open beneath the throne. Not from thunder, not from fire, from darkness. Quan Chi's smile vanishes. Noob Saibot stops moving. A new portal opens, black at the edges, gold at the center, and every warrior in the arena feels something ancient crawl through the air. Raiden's face goes pale. That is impossible. From the portal steps a figure in royal armor, carrying a sword broken at the tip. Katana stops breathing. Sindel covers her mouth. Shao Kahn turns slowly, and for the first time there is fear under his helmet. King Jerrod, murdered ruler of Edenia, looks across the arena with dead eyes. Then he raises his broken sword toward Katana and speaks in Quan Chi's voice. Your father has come home. King Jerrod's body walks forward, but nothing about it feels alive. His armor is cracked where Shao Kahn once struck him down. His skin is pale as old ash. His eyes carry no warmth, no memory, no father's love. And when his mouth moves, Quan Chi's voice slides out like a snake through bone. Katana's whole world collapses in silence. She had survived Edenia's fall by turning grief into discipline. She had survived Shao Kahn by hiding truth behind obedience. But this is not just cruelty. This is theft, her father's death, her mother's mind, her entire life turned into weapons and pointed back at her. Sindel steps in front of Katana, shaking with rage. Release him. Quan Chi smiles from behind the throne, one hand glowing with necromantic light. He was never yours to keep. Shao Kahn does not look pleased anymore. That is the first warning. Even he did not expect this. Quan Chi has not resurrected Jerrod to serve the Emperor. He has done it to break Edenia completely. Jerrod raises the broken sword and attacks. Sindel meets him with a scream that tears banners from the walls. Katana joins her, fan blades flashing through the storm of sound. Mother and daughter fight back to back for the first time, and something ancient seems to wake beneath the arena. Edenia is dead but not gone, not while they still breathe. Across the battlefield, Raiden finally understands Quan Chi's real plan. The tournament was never only for conquest, it was a ritual. Every drop of champion blood, every broken rule, every resurrected soul has been feeding the arena itself. If Quan Chi completes it, he will open a permanent gate between realms, and Earthrealm will not lose by tournament. It will be swallowed. Raiden shouts the warning, but Shao Kahn is already charging. The Emperor knows betrayal when he sees it, and his rage is volcanic. He swings the hammer at Quan Chi, but Noob Saibot appears between them, catching the blow in a wall of shadow. For 1 second, Master and Monster stand against an Emperor. Then hell breaks loose. Cole reaches Scorpion and grabs his arm. Quan Chi wants you angry. Scorpion's burning eyes lock onto him. Cole can barely stand, but he does not let go. You told me blood matters. Then listen to yours. That lands deeper than any blade. Scorpion looks at Noob Saibot, at Quan Chi, at the enemy who stole his clan, his life, his vengeance, and he makes the hardest choice a ghost can make. He stops chasing hate. Instead, he turns to Cole. Together, Gold and Hellfire crash toward the ritual marks beneath the arena. Johnny sees what they are doing and joins, green energy bursting from both hands. Liu Kang adds fire. Sonya pulls Jax up, and with his last working arm, he drives a metal fist into the glowing stone. The symbols begin to crack. Quan Chi screams, losing control. Noob Saibot freezes mid-strike, shadow peeling off his body like burned cloth. For a heartbeat, Bai-Han's eyes flicker beneath the darkness. Not redeemed, not forgiven, just present. Scorpion sees him. There is no speech. Only a chain spear through Noob's chest, pinning him to the ritual stone as Cole slams his golden blade down beside it. Fire, shadow, and blood collide. The arena shakes. The portal above them tears open, then folds inward with a sound like a dying star. Quan Chi vanishes into the collapse, screaming Scorpion's name. Jared's corpse drops. Sindel catches him before he hits the ground. For the first time, the dead king's eyes soften. Just a flicker. Just enough. Katana kneels beside them, and Sindel presses her forehead to his broken sword. Then Jared turns to ash in her arms. Shao Kahn rises from the rubble, wounded, furious, still terrifying. But now he stands alone. Katana faces him with Sindel at her side. Jade steps beside them. Liu Kang, Sonya, Jax, Cole, Johnny, Raiden, and Scorpion form a broken line across the arena. Nobody is untouched. Nobody is unafraid. That is what makes it powerful. Shao Kahn lifts his hammer. Johnny Cage, still bleeding from one ear, wipes dust off his ruined jacket and steps forward. You know, I was told this tournament had rules. Shao Kahn growls. Johnny's hands glow green. Here's mine. The final clash is not clean. It is fire and thunder, steel and screams, every champion striking not as legends, but as people with something left to protect. Liu Kang's flame blinds the Emperor. Jax breaks the hammer's handle. Sonya drives him backward. Katana and Sindel cut through his armor together. Cole opens the wound. Scorpion fills it with hellfire. And Johnny Cage, the joke, the has-been, the man who ran because he was terrified, throws one glowing punch straight into Shao Kahn's helmet. Crack! The Emperor falls. Outworld does not cheer. It watches. Raiden raises his hand and the sky above the arena clears for the first time. Earthrealm survives. Edenia's daughters stand free. Scorpion fades into flame, leaving Cole with only one final look that says enough. Johnny looks around at gods, warriors, queens, monsters, and broken stone. Then he laughs softly, exhausted. Okay, he says. Now I'm definitely putting this in my next movie. But Katana is not laughing. She looks at the horizon, where Shao Kahn's banners still burn. Victory has opened a door, not closed one. Somewhere beyond the ruined throne, a green amulet flickers in the ash, and a hand reaches down to pick it up. Simon McQuoid's return to Mortal Kombat II matters because this sequel is not just trying to continue a franchise. It is trying to correct a wound. The 2021 Mortal Kombat film had flashes of exactly what fans wanted. Bone-cracking violence, mythic clan rivalry, Sub-Zero moving like a horror villain, Scorpion arriving like revenge given human form. But it also danced around the one thing the title promised, the actual tournament. So when McQuoid came back for the 2026 sequel, the creative challenge was obvious. Stop teasing the arena. Step into it. Warner Bros. Officially lists Mortal Kombat II as a New Line Cinema action-adventure release, now playing theatrically from May 8, 2026. McQuoid is a fascinating choice because he did not enter this franchise as a traditional blockbuster filmmaker. Before Mortal Kombat, he was known primarily for commercial work, which explains both his strengths and his limitations. The 2021 film often felt like a collection of sharp visual ideas searching for a stronger dramatic spine. But when it worked through image. Frost crawling across glass, blood steaming in cold air, yellow hellfire cutting through darkness. That is advertising grammar, yes, but weaponized correctly, it becomes myth-making. Mortal Kombat 2 gives him a bigger canvas and, more importantly, a clearer mandate. And here's the thing. Mortal Kombat is not a property that survives through plot complexity. It survives through iconography, fatalities, rivalries, costumes, catchphrases, characters who look absurd on paper but feel sacred to the people who grew up choosing them on a character select screen. McQuoid's job is not to make the material respectable, by sanding off its ridiculous edges. His job is to understand that the ridiculousness is the religion, a four-armed monster, a Hollywood martial arts actor, an Outworld emperor, a fan-wielding princess. Handled badly, it becomes cosplay chaos. Handled with conviction, it becomes pulp opera. That is why the arrival of Johnny Cage is such a big creative signal. Karl Urban joining as Cage does not simply add another fighter, it changes the energy of the entire machine. Johnny is ego, comic timing, celebrity parody, and actual combat skill wrapped in sunglasses. He gives the sequel permission to be funnier without becoming unserious. Entertainment Weekly's first look coverage highlighted Urban's Johnny Cage alongside new major additions like Katana and Shao Kahn, which tells us the sequel is expanding not just the roster, but the tonal range of the world. McQuoid's vision seems built around escalation. The first film was Earthrealm discovering the war. The sequel has to make that war feel ancient, political, and physically massive. That means Outworld cannot just be a villain headquarters. It has to feel like a civilization with hierarchy, ritual, brutality, and its own twisted sense of honor. The strongest Mortal Kombat stories understand that the tournament is not only a fighting competition. It is diplomacy by violence. Every punch carries political weight. Every duel is a treaty written in blood. Producer Todd Garner's continued involvement also matters here. Alongside James Wan and New Line Cinema, Garner has been one of the key figures pushing this modern film version of the franchise forward. Reports around the sequel list McQuoid returning to direct from a Jeremy Slater screenplay, with Garner, Wan, Toby Emmerich, E. Bennett Walsh, and McQuoid among the producing team. That combination tells you the studio did not throw the first film away and reboot from scratch. They chose refinement over replacement. Same foundation, bigger architecture. The creative genesis of Mortal Kombat II also sits inside a larger industry pattern. Hollywood has spent years trying to crack video game adaptations, and the old assumption was that games had to be heavily translated to work on screen. But recent audience behavior has taught studios the opposite lesson. Fans want adaptation, not apology. They want filmmakers to understand why the source material mattered in the first place. For Mortal Kombat, that means practical brutality, game-accurate silhouettes, elemental powers that feel tactile, and fights that do not cut away when impact arrives. McQuoid's greatest test, then, is balance. Too much fan service, and the movie becomes a checklist. Too much reinvention, and the audience turns on it. The sweet spot is emotional clarity inside outrageous spectacle. Scorpion and Sub-Zero worked in 2021 because their conflict had primal shape. Family, murder, vengeance, legacy. Mortal Kombat 2 needs to apply that same seriousness to a wider cast. Johnny Cage cannot only be jokes. Katana cannot only be elegance. Shao Kahn cannot only be size. The vision has to find the human or mythic pressure inside each icon. What makes this sequel intriguing is that McQuoid now knows the battlefield. He has already survived the first round. The scrutiny, the fan expectations, the tonal problem of making fatalities cinematic without making them empty. Now he gets the chance every franchise director wants, the chance to make the movie that the first one promised. And if the creative vision holds, Mortal Kombat 2 becomes more than a sequel. It becomes the real opening bell. But vision alone does not win the tournament. A director can build the arena, choose the atmosphere, and set the rules, but the story still needs a spine strong enough to survive the blows. That foundation belongs to the screenplay, and this time, the writing has to do what the franchise has always demanded. Turn a roster of fighters into a war worth caring about. A sequel like Mortal Kombat 2 lives or dies on the screenplay's ability to do something deceptively difficult, make chaos feel designed. On paper, this franchise is a tornado of realms, champions, bloodlines, gods, monsters, betrayals, resurrections, and people yelling special move names with absolute sincerity. That can become nonsense fast. Jeremy Slater's job as screenwriter was not to make Mortal Kombat smaller. It was to make the madness readable. Warner Brothers. And IMDb lists Slater as the credited writer on the film, adapting the video game mythology created by Ed Boon and John Tobias. Slater is not a random hire. His career has leaned toward genre storytelling with complicated mythology. The Umbrella Academy, Moon Knight, and Godzilla x Kong. The new Empire all ask writers to balance character drama against worlds that are already crowded before page 1 begins. That background fits Mortal Kombat II because the screenplay has to act like crowd control at a supernatural cage fight. Every character wants the spotlight. Johnny Cage wants the joke. Kitana wants the tragedy. Shao Kahn wants domination. Liu Kang wants destiny. Sonya wants mission clarity. Kano wants the whole movie to shut up and let him steal scenes. And here's the catch. The 2021 film left behind a storytelling problem. Cole Young was created as an audience entry point, but longtime fans never fully accepted him as the emotional center of a universe already packed with beloved fighters. So the sequel's writing challenge becomes almost surgical. How do you honor what the reboot built without letting it block the tournament fans actually came to see? The answer appears to be recentering the story around the classic Mortal Kombat engine. Earthrealm versus Outworld, champions versus champions, survival decided through ritualized violence. Entertainment Weekly described the sequel as bringing back Liu Kang, Raiden, Jax, Sonya, and Scorpion, while adding Johnny Cage, Kitana, and other familiar game characters. That structure matters because the tournament is the cleanest narrative device this franchise has. It gives the screenplay rules. It gives every fight a reason beyond spectacle. Without rules, a fight scene is just bodies colliding. With rules, it becomes pressure. Win, and your realm breathes a little longer. Lose, and the universe tilts toward conquest. The best Mortal Kombat writing understands that combat is not interruption. Combat is plot. A fatality is not only gore, it is punctuation. Brutal, ridiculous, crowd-pleasing punctuation. Slater has spoken about the writing process in a way that makes the fan-first strategy pretty clear. Coverage from the Motion Picture Association notes that he discussed shaping a much longer draft down into a leaner version, including the challenge of deciding what the essential pieces of Mortal Kombat II had to be. That detail tells you a lot. A 140-page draft becoming something closer to 90 pages is not just trimming dialogue. That is triage. Characters get reduced. Explanations disappear. Lore gets compressed. Entire emotional beats probably vanish because the movie cannot stop every 10 minutes to explain a wiki entry. That is where adaptation becomes discipline. Fans may want everything, but movies punish excess. A video game can hold dozens of playable characters because the player controls the pace. A film cannot. It has to decide who carries the emotional line, who delivers the tonal relief, who represents the mythology, and who exists to make the action pop. The screenplay's hidden job is prioritization. The audience should feel abundance, not clutter. That difference is everything. Johnny Cage becomes the smartest writing tool in the sequel because he can say what the audience is thinking without breaking the world. A thunder god explaining an interdimensional tournament can sound silly. Johnny Cage reacting to that explanation with disbelief makes the silliness playable. He is the pressure valve, but he also gives the script a built-in arc, the fake hero forced to become a real one. That is simple, almost old-fashioned screenwriting. And for this franchise, simple is not a weakness. Simple gives the blood somewhere to flow. Kitana offers the opposite energy. Where Johnny is modern celebrity ego, Kitana brings court tragedy and royal mythology. Her presence expands the story beyond Earth heroes fight monsters into something more politically charged. Outworld is not just evil because Shao Kahn growls loudly. It has dynasties, prisoners, loyalists, defectors, and people born into violence before they ever choose it. That is the kind of writing that can make a fantasy world feel lived in. Not realistic. Better than realistic. Internally loyal to its own madness. Games Radar reported that Slater consulted Mortal Kombat co-creator Ed Boon while choosing game elements like fatalities and stages for the sequel. That matters because authenticity in this franchise is not decorative. A stage is not just a background. A fatality is not just a kill. These are memory triggers. They tell fans, yes, the people making this know what you came for. But the screenplay still has to earn those moments. Drop in a famous arena with no dramatic purpose, and it feels like merchandise. Build a scene so the arena reflects the conflict, and suddenly fan service becomes storytelling. The dialogue also has to walk a very narrow bridge. Too serious, and Mortal Kombat becomes embarrassed by itself. Too jokey, and the stakes collapse. The ideal tone is operatic trash with a straight face, and I mean that lovingly. Characters can say absurd things if they believe them. Shao Kahn cannot wink. Raiden cannot apologize for being mythic. Scorpion cannot arrive like a meme. The comedy belongs mostly to characters like Johnny and Kano because they create contrast. Everyone joking would flatten the universe. Everyone brooding would suffocate it. What Slater's screenplay appears designed to do is turn the sequel into the film the first reboot circled around. The 2021 movie was recruitment, setup, mythology loading. Mortal Kombat II has to be payoff. That means fewer excuses, cleaner momentum, sharper motivations, and fights that feel like chapters rather than interruptions. The script's success depends on whether it can make viewers care about the bracket, not just the brutality. Because once the writing chooses who matters and why, the next question becomes unavoidable. Who can embody these icons without getting swallowed by them? Casting is where mythology gets a face, and in Mortal Kombat II, those faces may be the difference between cosplay and cinema. Casting Mortal Kombat II is not like casting an ordinary action sequel. You are not just finding actors. You are assigning human bodies to characters that fans have carried in muscle memory for decades. Johnny Cage is not simply a cocky movie star. Kitana is not simply a warrior princess. Shao Kahn is not simply big villain with hammer. These characters arrive with silhouettes, fighting styles, voices, poses, memes, expectations, arguments, and decades of fan ownership attached. So the casting philosophy here had to be precise. Choose performers who can honor the icon without freezing inside the costume. Karl Urban as Johnny Cage is the headline choice, and honestly, it makes immediate sense. Urban has spent much of his career playing men who are dangerous, sarcastic, wounded, or all three at once. The boys made him a pop culture favorite for exactly the kind of swagger Johnny Cage needs, but Urban's edge is different from simple arrogance. He can make confidence feel like armor. That matters because Johnny is funniest when he believes his own mythology a little too much. The joke cannot be that he is fake. The joke is that the fake version and the real fighter are constantly fighting for control of the same body. Entertainment Weekly confirmed Urban as one of the major new additions, alongside Adeline Rudolph as Kitana and Tati Gabrielle as Jade. And here's what makes the Urban casting smarter than it first looks. Johnny Cage needs timing as much as kicks. Plenty of actors could wear the sunglasses. Fewer can land a punchline, throw a punch, and still suggest that behind the celebrity nonsense is a man desperate to prove he is not just a product. Urban brings weathered charisma. He is older than the pretty boy version some fans might have imagined. But that may become the point. This Johnny can feel like a star who has already been through the Hollywood machine, already tasted ego, already been bruised by his own image. That gives the screenplay something to play with. Adeline Rudolph as Kitana is a different kind of casting challenge. Kitana has to carry elegance and danger in the same breath. She is royal without being soft, deadly without losing emotional intelligence. Cast her too cold, and she becomes decoration. Cast her too modern, and the fantasy collapses. Rudolph's selection signals that the film wants Kitana to feel young enough to still be trapped inside dynastic conflict, but composed enough to suggest centuries of court discipline. Fandango's cast listing places Rudolph's Kitana among the central roster, directly beside returning Earthrealm fighters and new Outworld figures. Tati Gabrielle as Jade adds another layer because Jade is not merely Kitana's ally. She is loyalty sharpened into a weapon. Gabrielle has a screen presence that can turn stillness into threat. She does not need to overplay intensity. She can just look at someone and make the air tighten. That is useful for Jade, a character who often functions through precision rather than emotional display. Some fan reaction around Gabrielle's casting was predictably loud before the movie even arrived, but that says more about the danger of visual gatekeeping than actual performance. A character's essence is not skin-deep resemblance. It is posture, rhythm, conviction, and how the performer makes power feel. Then there is Martin Ford as Shao Kahn, one of those casting decisions that almost announces itself physically. Shao Kahn cannot feel like a normal man in armor. He has to feel like conquest gained muscle. Ford's size gives the character instant intimidation, but size alone is not performance. The real question is whether the film uses that physical scale as a mythic presence rather than just a visual gimmick. Shao Kahn should not merely enter a room. The room should feel occupied before he speaks. That is the assignment. If Ford can make stillness feel violent, the casting pays off. The returning cast gives the sequel continuity, and that matters more than people think. Ludi Lin as Liu Kang, Jessica McNamee as Sonya Blade, Mehcad Brooks as Jax, Louis Tan as Cole Young, Tadanobu Asano as Raiden, Chin Han as Shang Tsung, Joe Taslim as Bai-Han, Josh Lawson as Kano, and Hiroyuki Sanada as Scorpion form the connective tissue from the 2021 film into this larger tournament story. Fandango's cast and crew page lists these returning performers alongside the new additions, showing that Mortal Kombat II is expanding rather than replacing its foundation. That returning ensemble creates an interesting problem. Who gets oxygen? Kano nearly stole the first film because Josh Lawson understood the tone better than almost anyone. He played the material like a man who knew exactly how stupid and glorious this universe could be, without winking so hard that the illusion broke. Hiroyuki Sanada, meanwhile, brought the opposite energy, pure tragic gravity. Every second of his Scorpion felt ancient, wounded, and ceremonial. Put those energies in the same sequel, then add Johnny Cage, Katana, Jade, Shao Kahn, Quan Chi, Baraka, and Sindel, and suddenly the casting department has created both opportunity and danger. This roster is stacked. Stacked can thrill. Stacked can also suffocate. Damon Harriman's move into Quan Chi is especially intriguing because he is not the obvious monster villain pick. Quan Chi is not frightening because he is physically overwhelming. He is frightening because he corrupts the rules beneath everyone's feet. Harriman has the kind of slippery intelligence that can make manipulation feel casual, almost polite. That is exactly the flavor a sorcerer needs. In a film full of fighters, Quan Chi should feel like someone who does not need to win a fist fight because he has already arranged the board. The best casting decisions in fantasy action understand contrast. You need Urban's comic arrogance against Liu Kang's spiritual discipline, Katana's controlled royalty against Shao Kahn's brute imperial force, Raiden's solemn divinity against Kano's sewage-mouthed chaos, Scorpion's grief against Johnny's performance of confidence. That is how an ensemble becomes more than a roster. The characters have to scrape against each other. Chemistry in Mortal Kombat is not always romance or friendship. Sometimes chemistry is two worldviews colliding hard enough to draw blood. What makes Mortal Kombat II promising on paper is that the casting seems built around recognizability of energy, not just recognizability of faces. Urban brings swagger. Rudolph brings regal sharpness. Gabrielle brings controlled danger. Ford brings physical dread. Sanada brings myth. Lawson brings comic acid. Taslim brings lethal discipline. Together, they suggest a sequel trying to widen the emotional and tonal battlefield. The real test is whether the film lets them act, not just pose. Because once the right faces are chosen, the deeper question begins. Who actually carries the movie when the weapons are lowered? Spectacle gets people into the theater, but performance is what makes them care who survives the fight. Karl Urban's Johnny Cage carries the most dangerous performance assignment in Mortal Kombat II, because he has to walk into a universe of thunder gods, assassins, sorcerers, and monster emperors, and somehow make narcissism feel heroic. That is harder than it sounds. Johnny Cage can become unbearable if played as only ego. He can become toothless if played as only comic relief. Urban's version works best when the arrogance feels like a survival technique, the sunglasses less a joke than a shield. The official cast positions him as the sequel's major new Earthrealm recruit, with the story pulling him into the interdimensional tournament against Outworld. Urban understands how to weaponize swagger. He does not play Johnny like a clean Hollywood pretty boy floating above the violence. He plays him like a man who has built an entire personality out of publicity poses, bad decisions, and the need to be watched. That gives the comedy texture. When Johnny cracks a line, the laugh is not only because he is funny, it is because he is trying to control the room before the room exposes him. And in a film where everyone else speaks in prophecy, vengeance, or royal trauma, Johnny's modern movie star absurdity becomes oxygen. He lets the audience breathe. But the performance cannot stop at charm. The arc only matters if Johnny's theatrical confidence gets beaten into something real. That is where Urban's physicality becomes important. He has never been a delicate screen presence. Even when he is joking, there is weight in him. You believe he can take punishment, which is essential for Johnny Cage. The character's whole dramatic engine is humiliation transformed into courage. He begins as a man performing heroism and has to discover whether anything underneath the performance can survive actual combat. That is the sweet spot. Ego meeting consequence. Ludi Lin's Liu Kang serves as the opposite pole. If Johnny is noise, Liu Kang is discipline. Lin has always carried the character with a calm, centered quality, and that restraint is easy to undervalue in a movie this loud. Liu Kang is not supposed to dominate through volume. He is supposed to feel like someone whose body has become philosophy. Every stance, every glance, every controlled breath tells you he has spent years turning fear into form. In a lesser performance, that can read as flat. Lin's challenge is making serenity active, not passive, making stillness feel like contained fire. That matters because Liu Kang is one of the franchise's spiritual anchors. He is not just another fighter in the bracket. He is the idea that strength can be righteous without becoming cruel. Against Outworld's brutality, Liu Kang's performance style has to carry moral contrast. He cannot simply punch harder. He has to fight as if the way he wins matters. That kind of lead presence is quieter than Johnny Cage's, but it is just as necessary. Johnny gives the sequel personality. Liu Kang gives it gravity. Louis Tan's Cole Young remains the most complicated lead performance question. Cole was created for the 2021 film, which means he does not arrive with the same built-in affection as Liu Kang, Scorpion, Sonya, or Johnny Cage. That is a brutal position for any actor. Tan has to sell a character to an audience that may already be asking why he is occupying space in a roster full of icons. His best weapon is sincerity. Cole works when he feels like a grounded human being surrounded by mythic figures, a fighter whose fear and confusion let the audience feel the scale of the madness. He cannot out-icons the icons. He has to humanize the room. The danger is that sincerity can disappear inside spectacle. If Cole becomes only connective tissue, recruiting, reacting, explaining, then Tan gets trapped in functional performance. But when the film lets him play exhaustion, protectiveness, or desperation, the character gains purpose. Cole's value is not that he is the coolest fighter. He is not. His value is that he can make the tournament feel like something happening to bodies, families, and futures, not just a video game bracket brought to life. That may not satisfy every fan, but it gives Tan a clear lane. Hiroyuki Sanada Scorpion is in a different category entirely. He does not need much screen time to change the temperature of a movie. Sanada performs grief like an ancient ritual. His presence has weight before he moves, and that is why his Scorpion became one of the strongest elements of the previous film. Watch what he does with silence. The face barely shifts, but the pain is there, buried, pressurized, waiting to become violence. In Mortal Kombat, Scorpion should never feel like just another masked combatant. He should feel like vengeance that learned patience. Joe Taslim's Baihan offers the shadow version of that energy. Taslim has the physical precision of someone who understands that speed is not enough. Movement needs intention. Reports around the sequel note that Baihan's transformed identity is handled with care, keeping narrative clarity around the character even as the film embraces his darker evolution. That kind of performance depends on control. Baihan should not rage wildly. He should make cruelty feel efficient. Taslim's gift is that he can make a fight look like thought happening at killing speed. Martin Ford's Shao Kahn is less about subtle emotional shading and more about mythic impact. But that does not mean the performance is simple. Size gets attention. Presence keeps it. Shao Kahn has to feel like imperial violence given a body, not merely a huge man in armor. The best version of this character does not rush. He owns space because he assumes everything in it already belongs to him. Ford's physical casting gives the film immediate intimidation, but the acting challenge is rhythm. How slowly he turns, how little he reacts, how casually domination sits in his voice. The supporting lead energies around them sharpen the whole ensemble. Jessica McNamee's Sonya brings mission-focused toughness, Mechad Brooks' Jax brings wounded strength, Josh Lawson's Kano brings filthy comic electricity, and Adeline Rudolph's katana brings the poised tragedy of someone born into a royal nightmare. The confirmed ensemble is massive, with returning cast members from the 2021 film joined by Urban, Rudolph, Tati Gabrielle, Martin Ford, and others. That scale gives the movie richness, but it also forces every performance to define itself quickly. No wasted gestures, no blurry personalities. What makes the lead performances in Mortal Kombat II fascinating is the clash of acting modes. Urban plays celebrity ego under attack. Lin plays spiritual discipline. Tan plays human vulnerability. Sonata plays mythic grief. Taslim plays lethal corruption. Ford plays conquest. Put together, that becomes the real tournament beneath the tournament. Not just fighters testing strength, but performance styles colliding. Some are loud. Some are ceremonial. Some are grounded. Some are monstrous. The movie's emotional success depends on whether those modes harmonize or just compete for screen time. And yet even the strongest leads cannot carry a realm war alone. A tournament only feels alive when every corner of the ensemble has personality. When allies, villains, traitors, and scene stealers make the battlefield feel crowded with history. That is where Mortal Kombat II has its next major opportunity, turning a massive supporting cast into more than a character select screen. The supporting cast in Mortal Kombat II has one enormous responsibility: make the world feel bigger than the leads. Johnny Cage may be the loudest new arrival, Liu Kang may carry spiritual weight, and Scorpion may bring the mythic thunder. But this franchise has never belonged to one hero. It belongs to the roster. That is the entire pleasure of Mortal Kombat. You enter for one favorite fighter, then stay because every corner of the universe has someone bizarre, dangerous, tragic, or hilarious waiting to steal your attention. The sequel's ensemble has to make that character select energy feel cinematic, not crowded. Jessica McNamee's Sonya Blade gives the film a necessary line of human seriousness. Sonya is not mystical royalty. She is not a thunder god's chosen monk. She is discipline, investigation, military focus, and stubborn survival. In a movie full of prophecy and realm politics, Sonya keeps things tactical. McNamee's performance works when she plays Sonya like someone who refuses to be impressed by magic because people still die from it. That dryness matters. If everyone treats the tournament like legend, Sonya treats it like an operation. Same apocalypse, different vocabulary. Mechad Brooks Jax brings another kind of grounding. Jax is physical power with trauma underneath, and Brooks has the frame to make the strength obvious before the script says a word. But the more interesting side is vulnerability. The cybernetic arms are not just cool hardware. They are a visible reminder that survival cost him something. Every time Jax fights, the body is both weapon and evidence. That gives Brooks a strong emotional angle. If the film lets him use it, Jax should feel like a man rebuilding himself while the universe keeps demanding more violence from him. Josh Lawson's Kano remains the wild card, because Kano is the kind of character who can hijack tone if mishandled. Too much of him, and the movie becomes a stand-up routine with fatalities. Too little, and you lose one of the reboot's sharpest comic weapons. Lawson's gift is vulgar timing. He understands that Kano's comedy comes from interruption. Everyone else is trying to preserve dignity. Kano walks in like dignity owes him money. Variety's coverage of the sequel's cast notes Kano's return, with Quan Chi tied to his resurrection in the story, giving Lawson another chance to weaponize that rotten charisma. That resurrection angle is important because it folds Kano's comic energy into darker mythology. He is not just back because fans liked him. The screenplay can make his return feel like a symptom of Quan Chi's corruption. Damon Harriman's Quan Chi, then, becomes one of the ensemble's most valuable supporting presences. He does not need to dominate physically. He should make every alliance feel unsafe. In a movie full of fighters who announce power through muscles, weapons, and elemental force, Quan Chi's danger is quieter. He changes outcomes before anyone realizes the fight began. Chin Han's Shang Tsung adds another flavor of villainy. Shang Tsung is theatrical, poisonous, and predatory. He should feel like a court magician who enjoys the bureaucracy of evil. Chin Han has a polished menace that fits that perfectly. He does not need to shout to seem cruel. He can make politeness sound like a threat. Paired with Quan Chi, the villain side of the ensemble gets texture, One seduces, one manipulates, one corrupts, one conquers. That variety matters because if every antagonist only growls, Outworld becomes monotonous. Evil needs range too. Tati Gabrielle's Jade brings precision into the ensemble. Jade's power is not just combat, it is loyalty under pressure. She exists in emotional orbit around Kitana, but the trick is making her more than an accessory to someone else's royal tragedy. Gabrielle has the stillness for that. Her screen presence can feel guarded, like every word passes through 3 layers of calculation before she allows it out. Fandango's cast listing places Gabrielle's Jade among the major roster beside returning Earthrealm fighters and new Outworld figures, which signals that the film sees her as part of the sequel's expanded political and combat landscape. Anathu Nguyen's Sindel and Desmond Chiam's King Jared add family history weight to the Edenian side of the story. These are the kinds of roles that can deepen the mythology quickly if handled with care. Sindel especially is dangerous territory, because she can become either majestic tragedy or simple villain spectacle, depending on interpretation. The best version of her carries grandeur with sorrow underneath. King Jared, meanwhile, gives Kitana's world a sense of lineage. He turns royalty into memory. With characters like these, the ensemble stops feeling like a tournament guest list and starts feeling like a ruined dynasty bleeding into the present. Max Huang's Kung Lao returning is another emotional and fan service opportunity. Kung Lao's hat is iconic, yes, but Huang brought speed, confidence, and a sharp physical identity to the 2021 film. His presence gives Liu Kang a relational anchor. A champion is more interesting when we understand who he laughs with, trains beside, mourns, or remembers. Kung Lao also represents one of the franchise's great pleasures, a weapon so absurd it loops back into elegance. A razor-edged hat should not work. And yet, in Mortal Kombat, it feels like scripture. C.J. Bloomfield's Baraka is the monster side test. Baraka cannot just be creature design. He has to represent Outworld's brutality in a way that feels animalistic but not empty. The Tarkatan design is already one of the franchise's most recognizable visual nightmares. Teeth, blades, hunger, rage. But performance still matters. Body language can make Baraka feel like a person shaped by savagery rather than a digital obstacle. Games Radar's trailer coverage described the sequel as leaning into game-inspired levels, ninja battles, signature fatalities, and faithful fan details, and Baraka fits exactly into that promise of bringing the arcade nightmare closer to the screen. Tadanobu Asano's Raiden deserves mention here because supporting does not mean minor. Raiden is the cosmic supervisor of the story, the figure who gives Earthrealm's chaos a divine frame. Asano plays him with a quiet, almost weary authority. That is the right instinct. Raiden should not feel like an action coach. He should feel like someone who has watched civilizations gamble their existence before and knows inspiration is never enough. His calm makes the younger fighters look more human. His restraint also gives the film one of its crucial tonal anchors. The sense that this tournament is only one visible piece of a much older war. The ensemble succeeds when each supporting player adds a different texture. Sonya brings tactics, Jax brings wounded force, Kano brings filth, Jade brings controlled loyalty, Shang Tsung brings elegant corruption, Quan Chi brings necromantic rot, Raiden brings cosmic fatigue, Baraka brings monster violence. Sindel and Jared bring dynasty. Kung Lao brings legacy and style. Warner Brothers describes the film as the latest high-stakes installment in the franchise, in all its brutal glory. And that brutality only lands if the world around it feels populated by personalities, not placeholders. That is the danger and promise of Mortal Kombat II. The cast is huge, but the mythology demands hugeness. A small Mortal Kombat movie feels wrong. The trick is rhythm. Give every fighter one clean dramatic function, one visual identity, one memorable beat, and the ensemble becomes a living arena. Give them all equal exposition, and the film collapses under its own roster. Once that ensemble is assembled, the next battlefield is visual, because these characters are not only performed, they are designed. Costumes, realms, weapons, scars, armor, colors, and creatures have to sell a universe where martial arts, horror, fantasy, and arcade violence all belong in the same frame. The visual craft of Mortal Kombat II begins with a brutal truth. This universe cannot look tasteful in the conventional sense. Tasteful is death here. A restrained Mortal Kombat movie would be like a silent heavy metal concert. The production design has to embrace excess, but not randomness. Armor needs weight, blood needs texture, Outworld needs geography, weapons need identity. Every costume, throne room, training ground, arena, and creature design has to tell the audience one thing before anyone speaks. This world has been killing people for a very long time. That is where production designer Yohei Tanida becomes a genuinely exciting behind-the-camera name. Tanida's career includes visually rich work across Japanese and international cinema, and his presence on Mortal Kombat II suggests a sequel interested in physical atmosphere, not just digital backdrop. Behind-the-scenes material lists Tanida as production designer, alongside cinematographer Stephen F. Winden and editor Stuart Levy. That combination matters because Mortal Kombat needs the frame to feel built, lit, and cut around tangible spaces, even when visual effects extend those spaces into fantasy. Outworld is the design team's main battlefield. Earthrealm can be recognizable. Gyms, streets, movie star mansions, military rooms, training spaces. Outworld cannot. It has to feel alien without becoming visually illegible. Too clean, and it looks like a theme park. Too muddy, and the audience loses the pleasure of spectacle. The best fantasy production design gives viewers layers. Architecture that hints at empire, decay that hints at old wars, ceremonial spaces that hint at violence becoming tradition. Shao Kahn's world should not look improvised. It should look conquered. The Gold Coast production base becomes part of that craft story. ABC reported that the sequel was a $110 million production filmed in Queensland, with the harsh Tarkatan homeworld created on the Gold Coast and multiple realms built on earthbound locations and stages. That is exactly the kind of practical foundation this franchise needs. You can feel when actors are standing in a real space, even if the sky behind them is digital and the horizon stretches into nightmare. Sand under boots, stone under hands, smoke moving through actual light, those details stop fantasy from floating away. Creature design is another pressure point. Baraka and the Tarkatans cannot feel like generic movie monsters. They need that instantly recognizable Mortal Kombat grotesquerie. The blade arms, the teeth, the almost punk rock ugliness of bodies built for violence. The danger with modern creature effects is over-polishing. If everything becomes sleek, the horror drains out. Baraka should feel nasty, not cool monster toy nasty, wound-opening, bone-scraping, too close to the camera nasty. The design should make you understand why Earthrealm fighters do not just fear losing. They fear what Outworld turns living beings into. Costume design has an even trickier assignment because game accuracy and cinematic credibility constantly wrestle each other. Kitana's look has to preserve the elegance of the fan-wielding assassin without turning her into decorative nostalgia. Jade needs a visual language of loyalty and lethal precision. Shao Kahn's armor has to feel ceremonial and oppressive, not Halloween store bulky. Johnny Cage's wardrobe may be the most fun because it lets the film bridge Hollywood vanity and combat readiness. Sunglasses, jackets, branded self-mythology. Johnny's costume is basically ego with seams. What makes Johnny visually useful is contrast. Put him beside Raiden, Kitana, Liu Kang, and Scorpion, and he looks almost offensively modern. That is the joke, but also the story. He does not belong in this mythic arena yet. His design can chart that journey. Celebrity packaging gradually bruised, torn, dirtied, and forced into usefulness. A good costume arc does not need a speech. By the end, the fabric should tell us what the character has survived. Scorpion and Sub-Zero remain the franchise's visual holy ground. Their designs cannot drift too far from what fans recognize, because the silhouettes are sacred. Yellow, blue, mask, eyes, weapons, elemental identity. But live action demands texture. Scorpion's yellow cannot look like plastic. It needs weathering, soot, leather, metal, the memory of hellfire. Sub-Zero's coldness needs to feel architectural, like ice has become a discipline. Joe Taslim's transformed by-hand also raises the visual stakes, because the sequel has to communicate corruption and evolution without turning him into visual noise. Too many details can kill menace. Sometimes the scariest design choice is restraint. Shao Kahn's world should operate differently. His design language is domination. Spikes, skulls, height, hard angles, throne imagery, weapons that look ceremonial because they have ended dynasties. Martin Ford's physical scale gives the costume department an enormous advantage, but also a risk. Overbuild him, and he becomes a statue. Underbuild him, and he becomes a gym giant in cosplay. The ideal Shao Kahn design makes the armor feel like an extension of Empire. He should look less dressed than enthroned, even while standing. The arenas are the production design's secret stars. A tournament movie needs spaces that are not interchangeable. One fight should feel claustrophobic, another ceremonial, another savage, another almost supernatural. Game-inspired stages can become cheap fan service if they are dropped in as visual references, but they become cinema when they affect combat. A narrow bridge changes footwork. A pit changes fear. A burning temple changes rhythm. A Tarkatan wasteland changes what kind of brutality feels possible. Environment should choreograph violence before the fighters even move. Visual effects, naturally, have to extend the impossible. Future Associate, a Sydney VFX studio, describes contributing more than 200 shots to the film, including environment work, set extension, and FX simulation. That kind of work is invisible when it succeeds, which is exactly the point. The audience should not be thinking, nice set extension. They should be thinking, I do not want to fall into that realm. The best VFX in Mortal Kombat II will not replace production design. It will make the practical spaces feel like they continue beyond the edge of human safety. Color matters too. Earthrealm should carry more natural tones. Skin, concrete, sweat, streetlight, gym dust. Outworld can push harder. Bruised reds, dead golds, sick greens, volcanic orange, metallic shadow. But the palette cannot become one endless dark smear. Modern fantasy films often confuse dimness with seriousness. Mortal Kombat needs contrast. The violence is more satisfying when shapes are readable. The costumes are more iconic when the colors punch through smoke. This is a franchise born from arcade cabinets. It should not be afraid of bold visual identity. And that is the heart of the design challenge. Sincerity without embarrassment. The movie has to look at razor hats, blade fans, soul sorcerers, monster teeth, ninja specters, and skull-masked emperors and say, yes, this is our world. No apology, no ironic distance. When production design commits that hard, the audience follows. Maybe not because it is realistic, but because it is confident. The visual craftsmanship of Mortal Kombat II has to do more than decorate the fights. It has to give every blow a place in history. A throne room tells us who rules. A ruined realm tells us who lost. A costume tells us what a fighter believes about themselves. A creature design tells us what kind of nightmare Outworld breeds. When those details align, the movie stops feeling like actors dropped into game references and starts feeling like myth carved out of armor, dust, bone, and blood. But once the world is built, the camera still has to survive it. Production design creates the battlefield. Cinematography decides how we experience the impact. And in a movie defined by motion, violence, scale, and fatal precision, the next question is simple. Can the camera make every fight feel like something more than impact? The cinematography of Mortal Kombat II has one job before every other job. Keep the violence readable. That sounds basic. But modern action cinema keeps proving how hard it is. Fast cutting can fake energy. Shaky camera can fake danger. Darkness can fake mood. But a Mortal Kombat fight cannot be hidden behind chaos, because the audience is not only watching for who wins, they are watching how. The franchise is built on the pleasure of impact, pose, counter, reversal, signature move, and fatal punctuation. If the camera misses the shape of the fight, the movie misses the point. Stephen F. Windon's involvement is a strong sign for that kind of muscular visual storytelling. Windon has deep experience with large-scale action through the Fast and Furious franchise, where machines, bodies, speed, and geography constantly have to stay legible inside absurd spectacle. IMDb lists Windon as cinematographer for Mortal Kombat II, with Simon McQuoid returning as director. IMDb.com. That background matters because this sequel needs both scale and clarity. A fight with Scorpion's chain, Sub-Zero's ice, Baraka's blades, and Johnny Cage's ego cannot be photographed like generic punching. Every combat style needs a different visual rhythm. Think about Scorpion. The camera around him should feel ritualistic. He is not just moving from point A to point B, he is vengeance crossing space. Slower push-ins, heavier framing, fire cutting through shadow, moments where the image almost pauses before violence erupts. That is how you photograph myth. Sub-Zero or by hand needs the opposite temperature. Cleaner lines, sharper contrast, controlled movement, the frame almost freezing with him. Ice powers look best when the camera respects geometry. Let the audience see the trap forming. Let dread arrive before the hit. Johnny Cage requires a completely different lens attitude. His fights should have showmanship. Wider frames, cleaner body lines. Maybe even a little theatrical arrogance in the blocking, because Johnny is always half-performing even when survival is on the table. He should fight like someone who knows where the camera is before learning that the camera cannot save him. That is funny, but it is also character work. Cinematography can expose vanity. Frame him like a star early, then let the frame become harsher as Outworld strips the performance away. Liu Kang, meanwhile, should be photographed through flow. He is discipline in motion, and that means the camera needs to honor continuity. Longer takes suit him better than frantic cutting because his body tells the story. When a martial artist moves well, editing should not rescue the performance, it should reveal it. The pleasure is in seeing balance, footwork, timing, and controlled acceleration. A Liu Kang fight cut into fragments would be a waste. Let the flame build in the movement, not just in the visual effects. This is where Mortal Kombat II has to make a serious technical choice. Does it photograph fights as spectacle or as combat language? Spectacle says, look how big this is. Combat language says, look what this person chooses under pressure. The best action scenes do both. A fatal blow should be visually impressive, yes, but the camera should also tell us whether it came from rage, discipline, desperation, cruelty, or sacrifice. Same punch, different meaning. That is cinematography doing narrative work. Lighting becomes the next major weapon. Earthrealm can afford a more grounded visual texture. Gyms, streetlights, practical interiors, harsh training spaces, the kind of light that makes sweat and bruises feel real. Outworld should feel less safe, but not just darker. Darkness alone gets boring. The sequel needs violent contrast. Flame against black stone, cold blue ice against scorched red, sickly green sorcery cutting through smoke. The palette has to help the audience read powers instantly. In a cast this crowded, color becomes orientation. The camera also has to manage scale. Shao Kahn cannot be shot like an ordinary antagonist. Low angles are obvious, but obvious can still work when used with discipline. The trick is not just making him look tall. It is making everyone else seem temporarily smaller when he enters the frame. Leave space above him for banners, architecture, throne shapes, weapons, shadows. Let the world bend around him. That visual dominance sells imperial power better than dialogue ever could. If he has to explain that he rules, the image has already failed. For characters like Katana and Jade, cinematography should privilege precision. Fan blades, staff movements, and court-trained combat need elegance without softness. The camera can track arcs, spins, and sudden stops, letting the weapons carve lines through the frame. That kind of movement creates beauty with danger inside it. It should feel almost dance-like until someone bleeds. That is the appeal of these characters. Grace that does not ask permission to become lethal. Visual effects integration is another test of camera discipline. Powers in Mortal Kombat are not background decoration. They are identity. Fire, ice, souls, lightning, shadow, energy blasts. Each one has to feel like it emerges from the character's physicality rather than being pasted over it. Future Associate has described contributing more than 200 shots to the film, including environment work, set extensions, and FX simulation. FutureAssociate.com. That means cinematography and VFX need tight alignment. The lighting on set must anticipate the impossible thing that appears later. Otherwise, the spell breaks. Camera movement should also vary by realm. Earthrealm scenes can feel more handheld or physically present, as if the camera is close enough to bruise. Outworld can lean more formal. Symmetrical framing, ceremonial wide shots, bodies placed like pieces in a brutal imperial painting. That contrast gives the audience subconscious geography. We should feel when we have crossed realms before anyone says it. Cinematography can make mythology spatial. The most important visual principle, though, is restraint at the exact moment excess arrives. Fatalities are the selling point, but if every violent moment is photographed with the same screaming intensity, nothing peaks. The camera has to know when to hold. A clean, wide shot of a body about to be destroyed can be more effective than 10 rapid cuts. Let the audience anticipate the impact. Let the silence tighten. Then let the brutality land. The pause is part of the punch. There is also a nostalgic opportunity here. Mortal Kombat began as a side-on fighting game, and the sequel can nod to that without becoming gimmicky. A few composed horizontal frames, fighters facing each other in profile, arena space clearly mapped, background danger visible, could translate the game's DNA into cinematic grammar. Games Radar's trailer coverage even described the sequel as leaning into game-inspired levels and side-scroller energy, suggesting that the film is aware of its arcade roots. GammasRadar.com. Used sparingly, that kind of framing can make fans grin without derailing the movie. What Mortal Kombat II needs from its cinematography is confidence, not polish alone. Confidence. Confidence to show martial artists in full motion. Confidence to let costumes and colors pop. Confidence to make Outworld theatrical instead of hiding it in mud. Confidence to hold on a fatality, long enough for the audience to feel the horrible joke of it. The camera should not be embarrassed by this universe. It should stare directly at it. Because when the cinematography works, the fights become more than violence. They become personality, history, and belief translated into motion. Scorpion does not move like Johnny. Johnny does not move like Liu Kang. Liu Kang does not move like Shao Kahn. The camera has to understand those differences before the audience can feel them. That is the technical soul of a good Mortal Kombat movie. Not just showing bodies collide, but showing why each collision belongs to that fighter and no one else. And once the image delivers the blow, sound has to make it hurt. The crack of bone, the hiss of ice, the roar of fire, the silence before a fatality. Audio is where impact becomes physical. What the camera shows, the soundscape makes the audience feel in the ribs. Sound is where Mortal Kombat II can stop being watched and start being felt. The image shows a punch. The sound decides whether your body believes it. A clean kick to the ribs needs more than a thud. It needs air leaving lungs, leather shifting, bone stress, maybe a half second of room tone afterward so the impact has somewhere to echo. In a franchise famous for bodies being frozen, burned, split, stabbed, crushed, and spiritually violated, audio is not decoration. Audio is anatomy. It is the difference between spectacle you observe and brutality you flinch from. Benjamin Wallfish returning to the franchise is the right musical foundation. Water Tower Music announced the Mortal Kombat II original motion picture soundtrack on May 1, 2026, featuring Wallfish's score and a new version of the franchise's iconic techno syndrome, with vocals from co-creator Ed Boon. That detail matters more than simple nostalgia. Techno syndrome is not just a theme, it is cultural muscle memory. Those words, that beat, that arcade club adrenaline, they are wired into the franchise's identity. Bring it back lazily, and it feels like a cheap pop. Rebuild it with purpose, and it becomes a ritual summons. Wallfish is especially suited to this because his career lives between orchestral scale and electronic pressure. He co-composed Blade Runner 2049, scored the 2021 Mortal Kombat, and has worked across horror, superhero, science fiction, and blockbuster action textures. That range is useful here because Mortal Kombat 2 cannot survive on one musical flavor. Earthrealm needs pulse and grit. Outworld needs dread and imperial weight. Johnny Cage needs swagger. Katana needs tragedy. Scorpion needs hellfire grief. Shao Kahn needs the sound of a throne room becoming a battlefield. The score's biggest challenge is character identity. A roster this large can blur if everyone fights over the same pounding drums. Liu Kang should not sound like Johnny Cage. Johnny should not sound like Katana. Katana should not sound like Shao Kahn. The music needs motifs. Small musical signatures that let the audience feel who owns the moment before the edit confirms it. Liu Kang's theme can move with discipline and rising flame. Johnny's can lean into bold rhythm, maybe a flash of ridiculous heroic brass undercut by danger. Katana's music should carry royal melancholy, something elegant with a blade hidden inside it. And then there is Scorpion. His sound world should never feel clean. Fire is not just whoosh and explosion. It crackles, consumes, breathes. Chains do not merely rattle. They announce consequence. When Scorpion appears, the audio should make the air feel scorched before he enters frame. The best version of his sonic identity is part weapon, part ghost story. You hear metal, you hear flame, you hear grief pretending to be rage. Sub-Zero, or Bihan in his darker evolution, requires the opposite sound logic. Ice should not be treated as a generic magical blast. Ice has texture, brittle cracks, expanding pressure, glassy resonance, the horrible little creak before something snaps. A great Sub-Zero sound effect makes cold feel violent. Not pretty, violent. The hiss of temperature dropping can be scarier than the impact itself because anticipation does half the damage. Silence helps too. When the world suddenly loses ambient warmth, the audience knows death has entered the room wearing blue. The sound design also has to make powers feel physically connected to bodies. Bad fantasy audio makes magic sound pasted on. Good fantasy audio makes it feel generated from breath, muscle, rage, training, or corruption. Liu Kang's fire should rise out of movement. Raiden's lightning should make space tremble around him. Quan Chi's sorcery should feel rotten, not sparkly. Voices under voices, low frequencies crawling beneath dialogue, the sense that the sound is coming from somewhere below the floor of reality. That is how audio gives morality a texture. Fight mixing is where the movie either earns or loses its brutality. Loudness alone is boring. If every hit peaks at the same level, your ears get numb. The smarter approach is contrast. Smaller sounds close to the mic, then one massive impact that breaks the rhythm. A fist sliding against armor. Feet scraping stone. A weapon changing grip. A breath caught too late. Then crack. That is how you make violence musical without making it pretty. The body hears pattern before the brain names it. Fatalities need their own audio philosophy. They are absurd, grotesque, and audience-pleasing, but they cannot sound weightless. A fatality should have setup, punchline, and aftermath. The setup is tension. Maybe the score drops out. Maybe the room goes too quiet. The punchline is the impossible gore. The aftermath is the little sonic detail that makes people laugh, groan, or cover their face. Wet silence, metal settling, fire dying down. The crowd reaction inside the theater becomes part of the mix. That is the dark comedy of Mortal Kombat. Horror staged like Celebration. Voice is another hidden weapon. This franchise is built on declarations. Finish him. Flawless victory, character names, threats, realm mythology, challenge language. Use those phrases wrong and they become parody. Use them right and they feel ceremonial. Ed Boon's involvement in the new Techno Syndrome version is a clever bridge between game legacy and film identity, because his voice is part of the franchise's original sonic DNA. The soundscape has to understand that spoken words in Mortal Kombat are not always dialogue. Sometimes they are ritual triggers. Outworld should sound different from Earthrealm before we even see it. Earthrealm can carry recognizable acoustic spaces, traffic distance, gym echo, air conditioning hum, microphone feedback around Johnny's celebrity world, tactical gear, metal doors, human rooms. Outworld should feel older and more hostile. Wind through bone architecture, distant chanting, fires that never fully die, creatures moving somewhere off-screen, stone halls swallowing footsteps. The audience should hear empire, decay, and hunger baked into the environment. Music also has to know when to step back. A movie like this tempts composers and mixers to fill every second because everything is huge. But silence can be the sharpest blade. Right before a duel begins, silence lets the audience scan posture. Right after a devastating hit, silence lets pain register. Before Shao Kahn speaks, silence can make him larger than any musical sting. Noise tells us something is happening. Silence tells us it matters. The final mix should feel like an arena. Not just left and right, not just loud and louder, but spatially alive. Chains should whip across the sound field. Blades should pass close enough to make the audience's shoulders tighten. Fire should bloom outward. Ice should creep inward. A creature roar behind the viewer can do more world building than a line of exposition. If the theater feels unsafe in the best possible way, the sound team has done its job. What Wallfish and the sound designers have to achieve is balance between nostalgia and force. The score must honor the arcade bloodline without becoming a remix machine. The effects must exaggerate violence without turning it into cartoon fluff. The mix must deliver impact without exhausting the ear. At its best, Mortal Kombat II should sound like mythology being fed through speakers that smell faintly of smoke, iron, and old arcade carpet. Because after the music swells, the bones crack, and the fatality lands, The next question becomes how all of this was actually made. A movie this physical, this effects heavy, and this roster-packed is not born cleanly. It is built through locations, schedules, delays, stunts, reshoots, and the messy human labor behind every polished moment. The real tournament may have happened behind the camera first. The behind-the-scenes story of Mortal Kombat II feels almost too appropriate for the franchise. Production began, the fight was interrupted, everyone had to freeze in place, and then the whole machine came back swinging. Principal photography started in Australia in June 2023, with the sequel based primarily at Village Roadshow Studios on the Gold Coast in Queensland. Then the 2023 SAG-AFTRA strike hit, and the production was forced to pause in July before resuming later that year. Deadline reported the shutdown in Australia during the strike, while later coverage and production summaries noted that filming resumed after the strike and wrapped in early 2024. That interruption matters because movies like this are not easy to restart. A small chamber drama can pause and regroup with less physical chaos. A massive martial arts fantasy sequel is a different beast. Sets have to be held or rebuilt. Stunt teams have to stay conditioned. Actors have to preserve physical training, accents, fight choreography, injuries, energy, and emotional continuity across months of uncertainty. The audience never sees that part. They just see the finished punch. But behind that punch is scheduling math, union rules, location logistics, muscle memory, insurance paperwork, and hundreds of people trying to keep a fantasy world alive while the real industry stops moving. The Gold Coast was not just a backdrop. It was the factory where the realms were built. ABC reported that the sequel was a $110 million production filmed in Queensland, with Village Roadshow sound stages used to create everything from alien arenas to the harsh Tarkatan homeworld. That image is almost funny in the best way. Tourists riding roller coasters nearby, while inside the stages, crews are building acid pits, monster wastelands, throne spaces, and interdimensional death arenas. That is filmmaking. Absolute absurdity made practical by carpenters, grips, painters, stunt coordinators, effects artists, and people who know exactly where the smoke machine should sit. Simon McQuoid's comments about the Queensland crew reveal a lot about the production's working philosophy. He praised the stages, stunt teams, grips, and local crews, saying the infrastructure had become strong enough that Australia was no longer merely a viable option, but a serious global production hub. That matters because Mortal Kombat II is a movie that depends on departments talking to each other. Stunts cannot be separated from camera. Camera cannot be separated from VFX. VFX cannot be separated from production design. A chain pull, a fire blast, a blade swing, or a fatality only works when the physical and digital teams have agreed on where reality ends and fantasy begins. The stunt process is probably the real skeleton of the film. McQuoid said he, and supervising stunt coordinator Kyle Gardner, spoke about story and character before the fighting itself, which is exactly what you want to hear from an action director. Choreography without character becomes athletic wallpaper. Pretty, exhausting, forgettable. But when combat grows out of personality, the audience understands the fighter through movement. Johnny Cage should not move like Liu Kang. Kitana should not move like Jax. Baraka should not move like Jade. The stunt team's job is not merely to make people hit each other safely. It is to turn identity into motion. Karl Urban's Johnny Cage seems to have required a very specific physical and tonal commitment. ABC quoted Urban describing this version of Johnny as being at rock bottom rather than starting as the fully ego-fueled superstar fans expect. That is a useful production detail because it tells us the performance and stunt design likely had to evolve together. Early Johnny can look messy, performative, maybe even desperate. Later Johnny can sharpen. The body tells the arc before dialogue explains it. When action scenes are built that way, training is not just preparation. Training becomes storytelling. The production also had to manage a huge ensemble without letting the set become a traffic jam. Returning actors from the 2021 film were joined by major new additions, including Urban, Adeline Rudolph, Martin Ford, Tati Gabrielle, Anathu Nguyen, Desmond Chiam, and others. That much cast means overlapping schedules, fight rehearsals, costume fittings, prosthetics, creature work, wire work, and VFX reference shoots. Every character with a weapon creates another layer. Every supernatural power creates another technical requirement. Every fan-favorite design creates another risk of online scrutiny. The crew is not just making scenes. They are managing expectations with teeth. Josh Lawson and Jessica McNamee's comments about returning to Australia add a warmer human dimension to the shoot. Lawson, who plays Kano, described being close to home on the Gold Coast as a different experience from the usual hotel-based production life, while McNamee said returning to Australia gave her daughter a chance to spend time there. Details like that matter because blockbuster filmmaking often gets discussed as machinery, but cast morale shapes the texture of a set. People perform differently when the production feels punishing versus when it feels like a difficult adventure shared by a temporary family. Screen Queensland said the production employed more than 560 local cast and crew and injected more than $68 million into the Queensland economy. That number turns the movie into something larger than entertainment. For viewers, Mortal Kombat II is 2 hours of blood, realms, nostalgia, and spectacle. For Queensland's screen industry, it was employment, training, infrastructure, and proof that local crews could handle global franchise scale. These productions leave behind more than box office totals. They leave behind skilled workers who carry that experience into the next film. The strike delay may have accidentally tested the production's resilience. Nobody wants a shutdown. It costs money, disrupts momentum, and creates uncertainty. But sometimes interruptions clarify what a film really is. When a production restarts, everyone knows what has to be saved. The expendable pieces feel more expendable. The essential sequences become sacred. For Mortal Kombat II, that probably meant protecting the core tournament material. The Johnny Cage introduction, Kitana's political mythology, and the signature fight moments that fans would never forgive the movie for mishandling. That is the strange beauty of behind-the-scenes work on a film like this. The finished movie may look like chaos, but the making of it demands extreme discipline. Every grotesque fatality begins as a safe technical plan. Every supernatural duel begins as marks on the floor. Every arena begins as drawings, lumber, foam, fabric, lighting tests, digital previs, and someone asking whether the fake blood will stain the costume beyond continuity. Movie magic is not magic. It is repetition with better lighting. And with Mortal Kombat II, that labor had to serve a very specific promise. Make the impossible feel heavy. Heavy fights, heavy costumes, heavy myth, heavy fan expectations. The production journey was interrupted by one of Hollywood's defining labor events, rebuilt across Queensland stages, powered by Australian crews, and shaped by a director trying to pull arcade violence into physical reality. That is not a clean road. But Mortal Kombat has never been about clean roads. It is about surviving the arena. Once the production is complete, though, a different fight begins, the commercial one. Trailers, release dates, opening weekends, audience appetite, franchise expectations, and the cold mathematics of profitability. In Hollywood, even the bloodiest victory still has to answer one final question. Did the numbers finish the fight? The commercial fight for Mortal Kombat II is more complicated than a simple win-or-lose headline. On one hand, the movie opened with real force. Box Office Mojo reports a domestic opening weekend of $38.5 million from 3,503 theaters, a solid launch for an R-rated video game action sequel. On the other hand, by late May 2026, the film sits at about $74.3 million domestic, $45.2 million international, and $119.5 million worldwide. That is respectable. It is also not the kind of runaway number that instantly screams flawless victory. And that is where the business story gets interesting. Mortal Kombat 2 did not fail out of the gate. It simply entered the arena during a crowded May marketplace and discovered that nostalgia alone does not guarantee dominance. Its opening weekend was strong enough to prove that the audience exists. The title still has heat. The fatalities still sell tickets. Johnny Cage still moves curiosity. But theatrical performance is not judged only by opening weekend anymore. It is judged by legs. How long a movie keeps fighting after the first rush of fans shows up. The numbers list the film's production budget at $80 million, with its worldwide gross at about 1.5 times that production cost so far. It also reports a domestic legs multiplier of 1.89, meaning the total domestic gross is currently less than twice the opening weekend. That number tells a story. Front-loaded movies burn hot early because the core fan base arrives immediately. Then the casual audience either expands the run or fails to materialize. Mortal Kombat II looks like a fan-driven performer more than a breakout four-quadrant phenomenon. Fans came. The wider public came more cautiously. That makes sense for the brand. Mortal Kombat is famous, but it is also specific. This is not Mario, where parents, children, nostalgic adults, and casual viewers can all enter with minimal friction. This is an R-rated fighting game blood opera built around dismemberment, realm politics, and characters with names like Baraka, Quan Chi, and Shao Kahn. That identity is the appeal, but it also defines the ceiling. A studio can market the spectacle widely, but the product itself remains proudly niche in flavor, not small. Niche. There is a difference. The sequel also had to fight direct competition. Entertainment Weekly reported that The Devil Wears Prada 2 narrowly beat Mortal Kombat 2 during its opening frame, with the fashion sequel earning around $43 million in its second weekend, while Mortal Kombat 2 launched near $40 million. That matchup is fascinating because the two films were selling completely different kinds of nostalgia. One sold glamour, comedy, fashion, and legacy adult appeal. The other sold gore, combat, and arcade mythology. Same multiplex, different tribes. And in that first weekend, Miranda Priestley had enough cultural armor to block the fatality. International performance is the softer spot. Box Office Mojo's current split shows domestic revenue making up more than 60% of the worldwide gross, with international markets contributing about $45.2 million. For a fantasy action franchise, that international number matters. Action often travels well, martial arts often travels well, video game IP often travels well. But R-rated violence can complicate classification, marketing, and audience size across territories. The brand may be globally known, but recognition does not automatically become ticket sales everywhere. Still, context saves the movie from doom language. The 2021 Mortal Kombat was released during the pandemic-era hybrid HBO Max strategy, which made its theatrical numbers impossible to judge by normal standards. This sequel had to prove whether the rebooted film version could survive as a theatrical event. A $38.5 million domestic opening answers that question with a qualified yes. People will show up for this franchise in theaters. They just may not keep showing up week after week unless the movie becomes a broader conversation beyond the fan base. The budget question is where profitability becomes murky. An $80 million production budget does not include marketing, and a studio does not keep every dollar of box office gross. Theater splits, international revenue shares, advertising costs, and distribution expenses all complicate the math. So $119.5 million worldwide is not automatically profit, even though it sounds big. It is momentum, not a finish line. For a sequel to be financially safe, it generally needs either strong theatrical legs, strong international support, or major downstream value through digital rentals, streaming, merchandise, and franchise halo effect. And Mortal Kombat does have downstream value. That matters. This is not an original action movie hoping box office alone carries everything. It is connected to a decades-old game franchise with built-in brand recognition, potential home viewing appeal, collectible energy, soundtrack nostalgia, and ongoing video game relevance. Even a theatrical result that looks moderate can still support the larger ecosystem if it keeps the brand active and visible. Hollywood increasingly treats theatrical release as both revenue stream and marketing event. The movie earns money, yes, but it also feeds the franchise machine. Commercially, the film's biggest achievement may be proving scale. The first reboot showed there was interest. The sequel shows there is still a paying theatrical base, even if the ceiling remains limited by rating, genre, and competition. That is not a clean fatality. It is a hard-fought round. The movie took hits, landed several of its own, and left the studio with a question rather than an answer. Is this franchise worth continuing at this budget level? Or does the next entry need tighter costs and sharper audience expansion? The box office result, then, fits the franchise perfectly. Bloody, loud, imperfect, alive. Mortal Kombat 2 did not conquer the marketplace like Shao Kahn invading a realm, but it did not collapse either. It performed like a property with loyal fans, clear theatrical appeal, and a commercial ceiling the studio will have to respect. In business terms, that may be less exciting than a flawless victory, but it is still useful. Survival is its own kind of win. But money only tells one half of the reception story. The other half belongs to critics, audiences, fan arguments, Rotten Tomatoes scores, cinema score grades, social media reactions, and the cultural question every adaptation faces after release. Did it satisfy the people it was made for? Or did it only remind them what they still wanted? The critical response to Mortal Kombat 2 landed exactly where this franchise almost always lives, in the gap between what critics want movies to be and what fans want this movie to be. That gap is not automatically a flaw. Sometimes it reveals failure. Sometimes it reveals a film that understands its audience too specifically to please everyone else. Early reviews framed the sequel as a clear upgrade over the 2021 reboot in action, fan service, and overall fun, while still criticizing its thin story and uneven dramatic stakes. Rotten Tomatoes' first review roundup captured that split neatly. Stronger fights, bigger roster, more game accuracy, but still not a film anyone is calling emotionally rich. And honestly, that sounds like Mortal Kombat. This franchise has never asked to be judged like prestige drama. It asks a stranger question. Can a film make absurd mythology feel exciting enough that you stop caring how absurd it is? Critics who disliked the sequel tended to focus on the familiar weaknesses: flat plotting, clunky dialogue, thin character development, and spectacle that evaporates after impact. The Guardian's review was especially harsh, calling the film shallow and uninvolving, despite finally delivering the tournament the previous movie avoided. That critique is valid. If you need emotional consequence to feel airtight, Mortal Kombat 2 probably leaves bruises but no scars. But fan response tells another story. Rotten Tomatoes' public page highlights audience reactions praising the action, humor, story energy, and Karl Urban's Johnny Cage, while the site's related coverage labels the film as one that audiences say understands exactly what fans want. Screen Rant reported that the sequel debuted with a 90% verified audience score from over 500 ratings, the highest audience score yet for a Mortal Kombat film adaptation. That number matters less as mathematical perfection and more as cultural evidence. The people most emotionally invested in this property felt seen. For an adaptation, that is not nothing. That is the whole first round. The critic-audience divide became one of the film's main talking points. Forbes described the sequel as avoiding a rotten critics score while still showing a large gap between critics and verified audiences, with fans landing much higher than reviewers. That divide makes sense because reviewers are often judging narrative architecture, thematic depth, pacing, and cinematic elegance. Fans are also judging whether Johnny Cage feels like Johnny Cage, whether fatalities hit with game-accurate nastiness, whether arenas resemble memory, whether the movie finally stops apologizing for being Mortal Kombat. Those are different scorecards. Neither is fake. They just measure different pleasures. Karl Urban's Johnny Cage appears to be the major consensus bright spot. Even mixed reactions frequently singled out his comic timing and swagger as the sequel's most effective new ingredient. That is not surprising. Johnny gives reviewers and fans the same thing through different doors. Critics get tonal relief, fans get a long-awaited icon, and casual viewers get a character who can react to the madness on their behalf. In a film crowded with grim prophecies and bloody destinies, Urban's Cage gives the movie oxygen. When people talk about the sequel having more fun, a lot of that likely comes from him. The action received more generous treatment than the story. RogerEbert.com's review argued that the film delivers whenever its characters stop talking and start fighting, which is both praise and insult in one clean hit. That sentence basically defines the movie's reception. As a drama, it struggles. As a combat delivery system, it works more often than not. The sequel's reputation may rest on whether viewers see that as a fatal weakness or an honest genre trade-off. Some movies are built to haunt you. Some are built to make a packed theater laugh, cheer, groan, and whisper, "No way they actually did that." The cultural response around game accuracy was especially important. Games Radar reported that the sequel became one of the higher-rated video game movies on Rotten Tomatoes, citing a 76% fresh rating from 67 reviews at that point, and noting that it outperformed the 2021 Mortal Kombat and the 1995 original on the platform. That is a real franchise milestone. Video game movies used to be treated like a cursed genre, almost automatically dismissed as disposable brand extensions. Mortal Kombat II may not break the curse single-handedly, but it benefits from the modern wave of adaptations that have learned a simple lesson: stop being embarrassed by the source material. The fan discourse also revolved around who survived, who died, and what the movie changed after testing. Games Radar reported that an originally more violent Liu Kang death scene was altered after test audiences reacted badly, with Ludi Lin revealing that a harsher version had been filmed but softened into something more ambiguous. That is a fascinating reception detail because it shows fan expectation shaping the final movie before release. In Mortal Kombat, audiences want brutal deaths, but not careless disrespect towards certain icons. The blood has rules. Fans may cheer a fatality, but they still care who receives it and what it means. That emotional double standard is part of the franchise's weird beauty. Viewers want gore, but not random gore. They want shock, but not betrayal. They want fan service, but not empty references. They want the movie to surprise them, but only within the boundaries of a mythology they already love. That is a difficult audience to satisfy, and Mortal Kombat 2 seems to have pleased them more than critics expected. The reaction says less, "This is a great film by traditional standards," and more, "This is much closer to the Mortal Kombat movie fans were asking for." Different statement. Still meaningful. The online conversation also leaned heavily into clips, fatalities, and character moments rather than deep plot debate. That tells you what people carried out of the theater. They remembered Johnny's arrogance, the tournament energy, the expanded roster, the nastier kills, the callbacks, and the game-faithful flourishes. They were not necessarily defending the screenplay as elegant. They were defending the experience as satisfying. And for a franchise built on immediate visceral memory, that response may be exactly what the studio wanted. So the critical reception sits in a strange but honest place. Mortal Kombat 2 is not critic-proof, but it is fan-fortified. Reviewers can bruise it for thin writing, and they are not wrong. Fans can celebrate it for finally embracing the tournament, the gore, the humor, and the roster, and they are not wrong either. The film's reputation will probably settle as a flawed but energized sequel, stronger than the reboot, messier than great cinema, and much more confident about what kind of beast it wants to be. But reception is only the immediate verdict. The deeper question is what the film leaves behind after the cheers fade and the Rotten Tomatoes numbers stop moving. Because beneath all the blood, jokes, fatalities, and fan service electricity, Mortal Kombat 2 is still about legacy. Who inherits power, who earns identity, who survives violence without becoming consumed by it, and whether this franchise has finally found a cinematic form strong enough to endure. Beneath the gore, the tournament brackets, the realm politics, and the fan service fireworks, Mortal Kombat 2 is really about identity under pressure. That sounds too elegant for a movie where people get ripped apart in spectacularly disgusting ways, but that is the strange magic of this franchise. Every major character is fighting with two selves, the version the world sees and the version violence forces out of them. Johnny Cage is celebrity performance versus actual courage. Liu Kang is discipline versus rage. Katana is royal duty versus moral choice. Scorpion is grief versus peace. Even Shao Kahn is not merely a villain, he is conquest as identity, a ruler who can only understand existence through domination. That is why Johnny Cage becomes such a smart emotional gateway for the sequel. He is the most obviously artificial person in the room, a movie star, a brand, a walking poster. But the tournament strips away branding fast. Outworld does not care about fame. A Tarkatan blade does not care about box office. A sorcerer does not care how good you look in sunglasses. So Johnny's arc works because it turns the franchise's own theatricality inward. He begins as someone performing greatness, then gets thrown into a universe where performance means nothing unless it becomes action. That is a classic heroic journey, but dressed in Hollywood ego and blood. Katana's theme is inheritance. She represents the pain of being born into a history someone else wrote in violence. Her tragedy is not just that Outworld is brutal. It is that brutality has been normalized as politics, family, loyalty, and destiny. That gives the sequel its strongest mythic potential. A tournament can be simple. Fighters win, fighters lose, but royal conflict turns victory into consequence. When Kitana fights, she is not only defending a realm or opposing a tyrant. She is trying to decide whether bloodline defines morality. That is big fantasy material, operatic, messy. Exactly where Mortal Kombat belongs. Liu Kang carries the franchise's moral center because he turns fighting into discipline rather than appetite. That distinction matters. Plenty of characters in this universe love violence, profit from it, or use it as proof of superiority. Liu Kang fights because some things have to be resisted physically. He is not naive. He knows peace sometimes needs fists. But his presence asks the film's most important ethical question. Can you survive a violent world without letting violence become your soul? In a better-than-expected way, that question gives Mortal Kombat II more thematic weight than its surface may suggest. Scorpion embodies the darker answer. His whole myth is vengeance preserved beyond death. He is what happens when grief becomes identity so completely that even hell cannot burn it away. Hiroyuki Sanada's presence gives that idea the weight it needs, because Scorpion should never feel like just a cool catchphrase machine. He is pain weaponized. The tragedy is that revenge gives him purpose but not freedom. That is why Scorpion remains one of the franchise's most powerful figures. He is not heroic because he is pure. He is compelling because he is wounded beyond ordinary repair. Shao Kahn, by contrast, is power without conscience. He does not seek control because he fears chaos. He seeks control because conquest is the only language he respects. That makes him less psychologically subtle than some villains, but subtlety is not always the point. Sometimes a fantasy antagonist works because he embodies a force so blunt it becomes symbolic. Shao Kahn is empire with a hammer. He is hierarchy made flesh. He turns every realm into a possession and every opponent into an example. Against him, the tournament becomes more than combat entertainment. It becomes resistance against a worldview where strength is the only law. The film's legacy will probably not be that it converted every skeptic. It will not suddenly make Mortal Kombat respectable in the prestige cinema sense, and honestly, chasing that would be the wrong goal. The sequel's importance is simpler and more specific. It proves that a Mortal Kombat movie works best when it stops apologizing for being Mortal Kombat. The tournament, the fatalities, the bizarre lore, the impossible costumes, the arena logic, the game-accurate absurdity. Those are not problems to hide. They are the engine. That does not mean the film is flawless. The story still carries the burden of a massive roster. Some characters inevitably feel underused. Some emotional beats move too quickly because the movie has to race toward the next fight. The dialogue can wobble whenever it tries to sound mythic and explanatory at the same time. And yes, if someone comes to Mortal Kombat II looking for deep character psychology, layered political allegory, or elegant narrative architecture, they may walk out feeling like they ordered opera and received a chainsaw demonstration. But for the audience this movie is built for, the strengths are clear. It gives the tournament real presence. It understands that Johnny Cage is not optional seasoning but a tonal necessity. It expands Outworld beyond vague villain space. It treats the roster as mythology, not embarrassment. And most importantly, it recognizes that violence in this franchise has rhythm. Setup, challenge, clash, reversal, fatality. That rhythm is the heartbeat of Mortal Kombat, and the sequel finally lets that heartbeat get loud. The broader legacy also sits inside the rise of video game adaptations as serious commercial cinema. For years, Hollywood kept trying to fix games by making them less game-like. Mortal Kombat II argues the opposite. The closer it gets to the source's identity, the more alive it feels. That does not mean every reference works. Fan service can still become clutter, but respect for the material gives the film confidence, and confidence matters more here than polish. This world is ridiculous. The trick is believing in it harder than the audience can doubt it. So the final verdict? Mortal Kombat II is a bloody, overstuffed, uneven, highly energized sequel that understands its franchise better than its predecessor did. It may stumble as drama, but it lands as spectacle. It may not satisfy viewers who need every character arc fully developed, but it delivers enough personality, brutality, and game-faithful electricity to feel like the real cinematic opening bell for this era of the franchise. Not a flawless victory, not even close, but a decisive step forward, and maybe that is the most honest legacy this film can claim. Mortal Kombat II does not transcend its source material. It embraces it. The blood, the absurdity, the mythology, the swagger, the grief, the arena, the fatal punchline. It all belongs. The movie wins when it understands that Mortal Kombat has never been tasteful. It has never been subtle. It has never needed to be. It is a battle cry, a bruised arcade memory, a fantasy blood sport with the confidence to yell its own name. And when the sequel remembers that, it finishes the fight.